Welcome to the module on how people become wealthy through property. This is intended to make clearer the ways wealth is achieved through property, enable potential investors to set expectations and devise strategies appropriate for them. This module is suitable for investors and property investors. I've talked to many of my clients, other investors, friends and family about investing and investing in property. A lot of them grew up in families or groups where the principle of owning property and building wealth is hardwired, even automatic. My family has built their livelihood in Australia almost solely through property, and my own career revolves around the Sydney property markets. Yet, part of my philosophy is that many of us are too obsessed with the idea of jumping into property. Sometimes I'm quite happy to inform people that the investments they're thinking about aren't actually for them. Please keep in mind that you should maintain a well-rounded perspective when thinking about investment. From my own research of some of the top investors in the world, one message seems to be consistent: that the rewards of investing rely on patience and compoundment. They're yielded over time and definitely not overnight. Some of the most successful investors I've met are the best people in the world at saying no and waiting for the best opportunities to come up. Ronnie Chan, who's the chairman of a major Hong Kong development company, says, "You can be dumb and become rich through property." There's hope for all of us there. So if making money through property can be done by dumb people, then how does it happen? Let's break it down best we can. Point 1. Not all property is good property. The obsession with just getting into property is misplaced. My impression is that we don't have the same guardedness over property that we do when we are considering other investment outlets. For example, people seem to understand that there are good and bad stocks, but perhaps because properties seem more similar to one another, the same regard isn't necessarily applied. There is some very simple analysis we can run, and data is more available now than it has ever been before to work out the difference.
As you'll see in later modules
that go through the Academy, there are different forms and features of properties to be considered. Point 2. Rental. Rental return, paid by tenants of a commercial or residential property, has to be properly understood as one way of making money through property. This is not necessarily the biggest source of wealth in property. Most property investment experts will advise you that for residential property investment, rent is actually more of a tool to help you hold a property. That is, meet those expenses that are associated with owning it. In commercial property, however, rental return is often the major appeal, as this represents a more steady income stream and is more rewarding than the rents for residential properties, or so we seem to find. In some cases, investors actually have negative cash flow. That is, the expenses are greater than the weekly or monthly rent. Why on earth would anyone do this? See point 3.
Point 3. Capital growth.
Capital growth tends to be the principal means of generating wealth through property. This is typically a result of the increase in value or worth of a property over time. There is typically more capital growth to be realised in residential than commercial property. The Sydney Listings philosophy on investing relies heavily on this principle, which we will talk about more in later modules, being the benefit of holding investment-grade properties over the long term to make use of that capital growth over time. For example, a friend of mine bought his first house in Western Sydney for $9,000 in the 1970s. The same property is probably worth more than 100 times that amount in 2019. Point 4. Improvements and manufactured capital growth. From improvements and renovations through to whole-scale developments, rather than waiting for a property bought in condition Y to grow in value organically over time, there may be an opportunity to increase the quality, inclusions of the property, and even the number of dwellings that can be fit on the existing lot. Property developers generate the most wealth through property by developing the value of property through construction, usually by maximizing the number of dwellings that can be fit on a parcel of land. Point 5. Sell only when you have to. Build or invest to keep, for the long term, to realize growth. Don't sell out unless you have to, or if befitting a carefully tailored investment strategy. That would be to maybe reinvest those proceeds more effectively elsewhere. There are significant expenses associated with selling property. Agents' fees, conveyancing and legal costs, tax implications. The greatest though is opportunity cost. Go back to the example of a property bought for $9,000 in the 1970s in Sydney's West. So a property like this would have sold for around $100,000 to $130,000 in the 1990s, but for close to $1 million in today's market. It's hard to pick an average Sydney property, but from the years 1997 to 2018, Sydney prices on average increased by around 130%. Over this period, there were times of both incline and decline, including recently in 2018 itself. So the average property in Sydney would have made significant gains. If worth, say, $500,000 in 1997, it'd be worth 1.15 in 2018. And if worth $1 million in 1997, it'd be worth around 2.3 million in 2018. As we'll talk about later on, this growth from sitting back and letting a property work for you could have led to the purchase of other properties growing in this same time frame through equity. Also, with a bit of research, planning and assistance, the results of the average could likely have been bettered. In summary, the generic method for generating wealth through property is through a patient, long-term approach, which is based around finding the right properties or opportunities, using rent at the very least to be able to hold the properties long-term, and then making the most of capital growth and selling only if necessary or compelled by strategy. Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in to the Sydney Listings Academy. Just a quick disclaimer that this advice is generic and is not to be used by individuals. We take no liability for misuse of this information and encourage you to seek out professional advice specific to your situation. Please reach out to get in touch with our network of trusted professionals if you so need it. And just before you take off, just a quick note, obviously we're working on something with the Sydney Listings Academy to help educate people about the potential in property, finance and investing. So if you want to support the Sydney Listings Academy, please share the content with friends, family and followers if you have them. And also follow Sydney Listings on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn and or YouTube, wherever you like to hang out, as well as our website, and check that out for more resources as well. Thank you very much guys, and we'll see you in the next video.